Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is you're watching this. I hope you're all having a good day. I hope to see you all in class during the next class period. And I hope that this comparison and contrast, or this exercise about the Coney Island hot dog eat stand and the famous Nathan's eating hot dog eating contest and the hot dog stand in Reykjavik is helpful as you plan, as you start writing your comparison and contrast essay. So let's, as the subtitle says, let's talk hot dogs. The key question here, I think, is what are these essays about? You are going to hear me scream and shout in class. You are probably going to hear me scream and shout 4 or 5 slides on this presentation that the comparisons and contrasts are not ends unto themselves. They are a means to an end. And because of that, I think it's important to think about what is your essay really about. These essays superficially are about hot dogs. These essays superficially are about two hot dog stands, but there are layers to them. And by examining the layers in Green's work, I hope that I can encourage you and help you develop layers in your own work. 3 questions. In class, students will be asking, what's the subject? Should I be comparing or contrasting? Or perhaps there's material to do both. And what's the big idea shared by each pair of quotations? So let's take a look at the first one. If you take a few seconds and read while I talk, you'll notice that Nathan's Famous, has a variety of food from fried clams to veggie burgers, but it begins as a hot dog place. You'll notice that there's a line, and part of the ambiance here is imagining how it must have felt way back in the day. You'll notice that the hot dog place in Reykjavik, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name, has a surprisingly short line. You'll notice that it's a very small building. In fact, it was the building that was on the previous slide, and that you have an anthropomorphic Frankfurter wearing a chef's hat. The implication being that this is hot dogs and hot dogs only. The subject matter is the hot dog stands. I believe that you can contrast these because Nathan's Famous offers a variety of foods. The Reykjavik stand only seems to offer only hot dogs. The line at Nathan seems, the implication is that the line's long, the lines in Reykjavik are short. So the hot dog stands have some, contrasts. Also, it seems like everything about the hot dog stand in Reykjavik is in the present, and Nathan's is in the past. Next, we we talk about the hot dog's pedigree. King George VI, Jacqueline Kennedy, Stalin. Famous people have consumed them. If we look on the right, we see that they're famous. They're featured in travel guides, TV shows. It's a 5-star scale by thousands of Google users. We're talking about the fact, we're talking about the hot dogs, and we're talking about the fact that the hot dogs are famous. So I think this is a comparison through and through. We're talking about fame. We're talking about hot dogs. We're talking about celebrities who have eaten them, users who love them. It works, I believe, best as a comparison. Next, on the left, you'll see it's not the best food you'll ever eat. On the right, you'll see that it was the greatest hot dog I've ever eaten. Quality of the hot dog, obviously a contrast, not the best versus the greatest. The experience of eating the hot dog is mentioned in both. The experience is explicitly stated on the left. On the right, There's much more of a description. The repeat of "It's the greatest hot dog I've ever eaten." It cured the multi day hangover. It cleared the film from my eyes. It sent him out in the Reykjavik twilight feeling the kind of close to the chest joy that can't last, but doesn't need to. The experience of eating the hot dogs is the broad subject matter here. Superficially, I believe that this is a comparison. However, I think you can talk about the contrast because it's the clamor of Coney Island. It's the noise. It's it's everything huge about Coney Island in the tourist trap. Here, it's about being with friends. It's about the effects of this hot dog. It's creating a joy versus the rather superficial something special. There seems to be a lot more depth to eating the hot dog in Reykjavik than there is to eating the hot dog in Coney Island. So, although the experience of both is special, this one can be done both depending on the ultimate goal of the essay. If you take a look, I'm talking about ESPN, so there must be a sports thing. He talks about competitive eating as a sport. Like any sport, this is one about seeing what the human body can accomplish, and it has a variety of rules. Okay. Here he's talking about the team handball. The asterisk was in the text, or in the original text when I uh, got it off of my Kindle, so I can't recall what the asterisk is about right at the moment. He's excited about sports. So I think it's unusual sports. Competitive eating is different than the daily fare on ESPN. And team handball, I'm willing to bet that no one watching this, no one in class is going to be able to tell me the rules. So again, we're dealing with a comparison of unusual sports. We're dealing with the coverage of unusual sports. All of this, I think, works. At a superficial level, I don't think there's much we need to go deeper into anything. ESPN makes this a big deal. We're the Icelandic men's team handball. The context is talking about the Olympics. Olympics makes this a big deal. Unusual sports in venues that are not usually viewed as venues for unusual sports. So there's some depth here, but this, I think, is a straight up comparison. Now, I think we're talking about something a little different. He talks about the joy of a LeBron James fadeaway and the idea of Lionel Messier's ability being beautiful. And he contrasts within that you don't want to look away versus you can't bring yourself to look away. In other words, the hot dog eating contest is not beautiful. And in fact, it's like a car wreck where you don't want to look, but you feel compelled to look. Exultant. I love these people. There's a totally different feel. You've got tears and sweat smudging their red, white, and blue face paint. You see them happy. You see them celebrating. There is joy versus a sense of repulsiveness on the other side. So the reactions to the sport are totally and completely contrasted. So when you're talking about the two sports, remember you can't just start with the superficial level in the previous slide. You have to go a step deeper. What do these sports bring out in people? One brings out a sense of repulsion. If that's a word, I apologize. It's a repulsive activity. The other one brought out a sense of joy, or at least the crowds brought out a sense of joy. If you take a look at this next slide, you'll see that we have a sense of bigotry. The word's right there in the middle. We have a sense of inclusion. Everyone began to shout. He joins in even though he's not an Icelandic. He loves Reykjavik. And so the fans' reactions are two totally different things here. And so the unusual sports in this essay, the discussion of the unusual sports in this essay, have an important thing to do. They show that one creates a sense of bigotry, the other one creates a sense of inclusion. So, again, even at the surface, if they're similar, all right, the purpose of the fans' reaction and then doing another thing with the fans shows that one of them produces a sort of repugnant joy, the other, or repugnant, well, joy because he's screaming, "We have our confidence back." The other one produces a sort of inclusive joy. This It's like layering it, pulling the layers off of an onion. You have the outer skin, you have some, you can just kind of layer it back. And I think that's your job in the comparison and contrast. Why should I care? In this case, I should care because one activity is ugly and produces an ugly fan. The other activity, although we're not describing the activity itself, produced this feeling of euphoria. This feeling of euphoria was inclusive, and it didn't matter about whether he was a native of Iceland or not. He was allowed to be included. Okay? Both of these, I think, are about excess. I do not often drink to excess on the right. I have an intense fear of hangovers. That's a bit of excess as well. Overindulgence. This, I think, is a comparison. One's hot dog eating contest, one's a more personal experience, but both of them are things to be compared. Both of them are things that, if done too much, are going to make people throw up. The excess here is a comparison straight up, I believe. Here we're talking about comments, a widespread backlash. On the other side, we're talking about he convinces the audience these guys are athletes. He does such a good job. He convinces me I'm an athlete. I believe that both of these are about hype. One of them is just blatant, huge hype. The other one is more of a crowd based, crowd-sourced, for lack of a better word, hype. This is a hot dog. People seem to be reacting to the fact that it's famous by pointing out that it's not that great. On the other side, you have a guy whose job it is, Shay, I believe in the previous slide he was identified as, and it's in this slide too. Shay's job is to be a hype man. And he is so good at it that he convinces Joey Chestnut that he's an athlete, even though the most active he has is bringing his hand from the plate to the mouth. I think if you take a look here, these two are both going into the idea that hype can turn falsehood into truth, and that hype can have some ugly effects. And even though we're hyping and hyping, if it's just a joke, it can sometimes be cruel. And if it can be hyped and hyped and hyped, it creates some false impressions. Now, I think in the one on the right, there's a double layer of irony in the fact that she is hyping up Greenland, or she's hyping up Iceland, where the weather is quite mild. Meanwhile, there's this cold rain blowing horizontally, rendering umbrellas utterly useless. So her hype is being tossed back or being refuted almost immediately. This doesn't look like anything like mild weather to me. But once again, we have some points about hype. We have some point that hype matters. And so the subject, I think, needs to go beyond, or the point needs to go beyond just hype. Hype here is still the subject. All right. And I think this is the same sort of thing. Being careful about the effect of hypes, being careful about the preposterous stories. On the left, Green is basically just preaching a sermon. On the right, he is giving us an illustration. I think this is the example of claim and data. The claim, carnival barkers of the world must be careful which preposterous stories they tell us because we will believe them. The data is the tour guide, who is basically a carnival barker of quieter tone, talking about Iceland has many natural wonders. As you can see, this waterfall is very historic. Even now, I cannot see a waterfall without thinking very historic. This is a perfect example of claim and data. Now let's tie it all together with some warrants. I'm not doing that, but in your essay, you need to remember to do that. Once again, the subject is hype. Some quick reminders. Number one, limit the focus. We were experiencing famous hot dog stands. We were talking about the quality of the hot dogs. We were talking about unusual sports. We're talking about fans' reaction to unusual sports. We're talking about excess. We're talking about reaction to hype. You can't put all of these in an essay. Pick what you're going to compare and contrast. Pick the subject. The famous hot dog stands, the hot dog's quality, and hype can go together. The unusual sports, the fans' reactions, and excess can all go together. Perhaps you can mix and match, but limit the focus to 3, 4 tops. Have a purpose. Why are these comparison and contrasts happening? He's comparing, yeah, good grief. He's comparing and contrasting to get us to think about the effects of hype, to get us to think about the effects of excess and the fact that the effects of both can be comedic, but oftentimes that comedy turns ugly. You need to do the same thing. What's the point of whatever it is you're comparing? What's the point of whatever it is you're contrasting? And remember, a comparison contrast essay needs to do both. All of the images were stolen for the web for educational purposes. All of the quotations came from Green's The Anthropocene Reviewed. I hope all of you have a good day. Hope to see you all in class all of you in class next class period. I hope this was helpful and that you're in a little better shape watching this or viewing the slides in class as you prepare to write the essay.